This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Checking to see if you're awake. Welcome to the Schwartz Center for Performing Arts. I'm Dr. Candy Tate, Assistant Director for the Center for Creativity and Arts. And on behalf of our Executive Director, Leslie Taylor, I welcome you here. We have some very distinguished visitors in our midst, and I wanted to welcome them. You are here for the Center for Creativity and Arts Creativity Conversation. And it will be a conversation and dialogue it's a program that we do regularly, and we engage artists in conversation about their creative process, so you're in for a treat. Particularly Emiko, who is the project grant recipient, we have a program where you can apply for funds from the Center for Creativity. Students can apply for up to $500, staff $1,000, and faculty up to $1,500. Our next project grant deadline is March 21st, so look on creativity.emory.edu if you're interested in applying. But because of that grant, Emiko was able to do this exhibit, and then at the Hammond's house, I had the opportunity to see a conversation at the Ethics Center and got even more passionate about it and said, I would love to have you talk with Dr. Bernard Lafayette. Before I get too far ahead of myself, let me introduce you to these great and wonderful people. Emiko Soltis is a doctoral recipient from Emory University, and she's currently on staff at the Visual Arts Department and a professor at Freedom University. As I said, she's an alum of the Laney Graduate School, and her dissertation involved the ethnography and photography essay of interracial migrant farm workers movement in Florida. She's also an alum of the Emory Institute of Human Rights Graduate Certificate Program. And Dr. Bernard Lafayette is an ordained minister and a lifelong civil rights activist, organizer, and authority on nonviolent social change. He is a distinguished scholar in residence here at Emory in the Candler School of Theology, and he's co-founder of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, otherwise known as SNCC, started in 1960 and was a core leader in the civil rights movement in Nashville, Tennessee, and also in Selma, Alabama in 1965. In 1962, at the age of 22, he assumed the directorship of the Alabama Voter Registration Project in Selma, and the city had previously removed the organization because it was a danger for operating there. He is appointed by Martin Luther King Jr. And the National Program Administrator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, and National Coordinator of the 1968 Poor People's Campaign. And you're now Executive Chairman of the Board for SCLC. So without further ado, I bring you our guest, and you'll introduce everyone else. Let me go with. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this creativity conversation. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I know noon on a Thursday is difficult for many of you, so we really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. I do want to introduce several of our Freedom University students. This is Silvia Carrera and Roger Gregorio. We might be expecting one more, so just be aware that Eduardo Samaniego might be joining us in a few minutes as well. But before we begin, I did want to thank several organizations that have helped sponsor Freedom University on this campus. In November, we did a panel that introduced Freedom University to this campus for the first time, and several departments, the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, Latin American and Caribbean Studies, the Visual Arts Department, and the Ethics and Arts Initiative helped bring us to campus for the first time, so we're really glad to be here again. And then I do also want to thank the 4 professors who started Freedom University about 2.5 years ago. Dr. Pamela Vocal from the University of Georgia couldn't join us today, but I do want to recognize their work in starting Freedom University to provide a college-level education to those undocumented students banned from Georgia State universities and colleges today. So first I want to talk a little bit about the outline for today's conversation. let's see. I think it's best to give a little bit of background about the band so people know a little bit of the historical context. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what Freedom University is and the Freedom University Photo Project. And that will have the opportunity, if you haven't already seen the exhibit, Roger and Sylvia will talk a little bit about their work and participation. And then, if Eduardo is not here yet, I will talk a little bit about Freedom University students' participation in nonviolent direct action to also change these policies that discriminate against them and ban them from Georgia schools. So, and that will be a good segue, I think, to Dr. Bernard Lafayette's expertise in nonviolent direct action training, both in the U.S. South, in the history of the Black civil rights movement here in the United States, student movements, and freedom struggles around the world. So if you guys want to say a little bit about maybe yourselves, first about how you first came in contact with Freedom University, I think that'd be a great introduction.
Hey guys, I'm Roger Gregorio. I was first introduced to Freedom University by my friend Maria, who's also a student. And she introduced me during the summer, past summer, where she told me like, hey, some comes in, so what are you thinking? Are you gonna pay out of state, or what are you gonna do for college? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I'm just gonna probably work for now. She introduced me to Freedom University, that it was based upon UGA professors in Athens. So I'm like, you know what? And it's only on Sundays. I thought I'm really not doing much on Sundays, so I'll give it a try. That's where I went in, and I got to meet a couple of the teachers and all the other students, where I saw that they were just like me, who, even though we graduated, we did everything, we passed our classes and everything, and we just wanted to study, weren't able to, but that's where I was introduced to Freedom University. It was a great program because I saw that there was a lot of professors out there who were willing to take a risk for us to be able to study. So that was a little bit how I was introduced to Freedom.
Hi there, my name is Sylvia Carrera. I am a GUYA activist and student at Freedom University. GUYA stands for Georgia Undocumented Youth Alliance. I was introduced to Freedom University with the same friend, Maria. It all started when we all graduated and I was unemployed for 2 or 3 months. And then I started working 2 jobs. I worked from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. and I started Freedom around the same time. At the time I was really passionate about, I still am, but I was excited to get involved, but I didn't realize how real life it was. And I didn't notice how undocumented student in Georgia was really affecting me. And Freedom University just helped me get through it. The fact that Pam is always in class, she's always at all of the events. Rarely do I not see her. And she's always supporting us in every rally. And we're like, what do we do next? I'm like, it's your thing. And we scream and we shout. We chant. We do it in a peace way. We don't do anything dangerous until our peers get the civil disobedience. But yeah, Freedom University, we don't get credited for, but we do receive help from professors such as Emiko, from Emory, from UGA, from Georgia State. Our credit per se is that they review us, their essays, they help us find scholarships, and they help us find a college that suits us. We had a field trip to Berea College in Kentucky for those who applied, because for the application we had to be interviewed, and they at no cost took us and we did the interview, and we came back, and I think that stuff of help we would have never had in high school, and we would have never known if it wasn't for Freedom University and the professors. So that for us is just amazing, to even have like a college experience visit, and to even know that we can receive some help and not to give up. So that was our motivation.
I do want to give a little bit of historical context to the ban. As many of you might know, there's 1.6 million undocumented students between the ages of 19 to 24 in the United States. Unfortunately, less than 1% of them go to college, whereas 41% of their documented peers go to college. And so obviously this has an enormous impact on the rest of their lives. Their ability to earn a decent living, to provide for their families, impacts their health, it impacts so many of their opportunities for an entire lifetime. And this ban was actually, came about with Georgia Region's Policy 4.1.6, 416, that effectively banned students from the top 5 universities and colleges, public universities and colleges in Georgia. Policy 4.3.4 also denied them in-state tuition. So what that means in terms of the context of the United States is that there's only 4 states that ban, 3 states that ban students who are undocumented. That's Alabama, South Carolina, and Georgia. There are 4 states that prohibit undocumented students from paying in-state tuition, regardless of how long they may have lived in a certain state, sometimes 15 to 18 years even. And those states are Colorado, Indiana, Ohio, and Georgia. And so you might realize that Georgia is the only state in the United States that both bans students and prevents them from paying in-state tuition. And so these policies effectively resegregate universities in Georgia by assigning students to separate and unequal institutions solely based on their documentation status. And it's also important to note that the argumentations, right, for these bans. When this policy was passed, the legislators said it was for 2 main reasons. One, that undocumented students were taking away places from residents, legal residents. And 2, that it was putting an undue tax burden on the Georgia taxpayers. Those were their 2 main justifications. But actually when they had a study done, it actually ended up kind of undermining their justifications. That study found that out of the 310,000 students that go to Georgia public universities, only 501 were undocumented. If you do the math, that's 0.16%. So in effect, they're not taking away very many spaces from undocumented students. And we have Eduardo here. Why don't you join me up here?
Evening, actually.
So I was just doing a little bit of introduction. Welcome. Nice to see you. And so that justification of they were taking away spots was undermined. Also, every single one of those 501 students was paying out-of-state tuition. So they were effectively subsidizing other students' education. So those 2 reasons really don't have any standing when you analyze the data of undocumented students in Georgia. And so that actually violates basic principles of equal protection under the 14th Amendment, that states need to provide a justification if they're going to discriminate against residents. And this has many impacts. In the United States, K-12 education has to be provided to all students of certain ages. And we, as a state and as a country, invest almost $100,000 in each student from K-12. By banning them from public universities, we are failing to capitalize on that investment that we've already made. It tarnishes the reputation of Georgia in particular with its history of segregation. In 1960, the 5 universities that banned students based on their race are now the same 5 universities that ban students based on their immigration status. And it really limits college diversity as well. I bet a lot of students that are here today have never really thought of themselves as documented, right, as a part of your identity. And by not having undocumented students, we are doing a disservice to all students from the benefits of having a diverse campus that will allow people to participate in a global economy with really diverse students who speak sometimes 2 or 3 languages, and the perspectives that comes from those experiences as well. And please let me know if I'm getting too dorky here, but it also really violates a lot of international human rights law that the United States is party to. It violates CERD, which is the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Legally, it violates it. It violates the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which all say that education, even higher education, should be provided on the basis of merit and not discriminated based on any kind of human difference. And so for all those reasons, this is a very important issue that's facing not only Georgia, but the United States and around the world with immigration and how we morally meet our obligations to our fellow human beings. And in Georgia, it's really important that this issue really came to light based on the courage and the determination of young people. Immediately when this ban took place, there was mobilizing by undocumented students themselves. The Georgia Undocumented Youth Alliance that Sylvia had mentioned were out on the streets engaging in nonviolent civil disobedience immediately. And there are many other organizations, and Freedom U sprung up out of that need to address this exclusion by undocumented students. And so Freedom U started in 2011, I believe. 4 professors from the University of Georgia founded that, and those teachers are Dr. Pamela Vogel, Dr. Bethany Morton, Bettina Kaplan, and Lorgia Garcia-Pena. And I was asked to join the Freedom U staff this past fall, and it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to serve these students. And I think they all recognize that I learn a lot more from them than they probably learn from me. But we have an awesome time in class. This past fall, our class was entitled Who Belongs Here? Human Rights and Identity in the U.S. South. And as part of that class this last fall, where we met at the King Center here in Atlanta, I had the idea in part because we became Facebook friends and stuff, that a lot of them take pictures on a daily basis, documenting their lives, from selfies to themselves on marches to their families. And I realized what a valuable resource this was, not only to them, but for the general public to see that these are normal kids who want to have an education and who want to succeed in life. And so we had an idea, we started talking about in class, the possibility for making these photos of their lives accessible to the general public and how that would take form. So that was really the birth of the Freedom U Photo Project, which is called Documenting the Undocumented. And so as you can see here, this features 14 students' work, and their narratives are also available in several of these packets that are floating around the room. So please, if you haven't had the chance to before this event, please take the time to look at these photographs and read their narratives as well. And I think the CCA has them available online. And so without me blabbering anymore, I want to open it up to the students to talk a little bit about their photographs. And I'm going to end with Eduardo and his photo over here. Eduardo was one of 2 students who was arrested at the Georgia Board of Regents meeting in November. He and Giovanni Diaz, you will actually love this story, by the way. Part of our fall class, we studied the student movement, particularly in the U.S. South, during the Black freedom struggle. And so we read a lot of materials. We also saw a clip from Eyes on the Prize. And you know, as a teacher, you are looking at their faces, hoping things are sinking in and building connections. And at this event where Giovanni and Eduardo disrupted the meeting, and the Board of Regents is the institution that banned the students. During the Nashville student movement, Diane Nash approached Mayor Ben West at one point, and students had been participating in nonviolent civil disobedience, sitting in at lunch counters, and she asked him in front of the cameras, instead of talking about a larger issue, what is right and wrong, she asked Mayor West directly, Mayor West, do you as an individual think it is morally right to discriminate someone based on the color of their skin? She asked him directly, one-to-one. And of course, Eduardo and Giovanni had those things playing in their mind, this training from class. And Eduardo, I think he had a bow tie on and like a nice little velvet jacket. He went right up kindly and with respect to Chancellor Huckabee. He said, Chancellor Huckabee, do you think it is morally right to discriminate against someone based on their documentation status? And as a teacher, we're all like, yes! The connections were made, and immediately, the police escorted them out. And my heart sank. I don't, as a teacher, want to bail out my students from jail, but that's what happened. And they were risking so much in being arrested as undocumented students. And so, all that to say, we're going to end with Eduardo, and hopefully that can be a nice segue into talking about the role of students in creative action in nonviolent civil disobedience.
Could I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Did you ever get an answer?
It's hard to say. I think the answer, was kind of on his face, right away.
Didn't need to be said.
Yeah, it was something that happened really fast. I mean, I didn't even realize, that I was there, in front of this person that had, been in I guess if I want to put it, in my nightmares, every single night. And so when I come up to him and I asked him that, his face was completely, I guess, the expression on his face was just, I guess, I remember that he put his hand, here, and then he backed up a little bit, and it was like, a moment where I kind of saw, that he was, his face was just, I guess, his expression was something that he was very sad, in a way, something like that, I saw that he was, maybe because he wasn't expecting it, maybe he thought about, so many things, because up until that day after I did the civil disobedience, I didn't know that he was the only regent, out of the 19 members in the Board of Regents of Georgia that opposed the ban. The chancellor was the only one that, came out, to say that he was not for it, that this shouldn't be. And I found out after I did the civil disobedience, and for me to ask him, that, to him, the one that was against it, and I didn't know that, kind of like really touched me, and I bet, it made him realize, that he could have possibly done, a lot more, or, that, that shouldn't be, So just, I think, he gave us the answer before, and of course, there is always that question, could have he done more, perhaps he could have, and I think, the answer, is yes, but, he was the only one that came out publicly, opposing the ban.
So Roger or Sylvia, do you want to start maybe talking about your photograph? I don't think we need to walk over there, but people will get a chance to see it. Your inspiration behind the photograph and maybe a little bit of your narrative.
I'll give it a start. Great. My photograph, is right there. I don't want to point, but it's on the right. I was really inspired by my grandmother's laugh. She was laughing, we were at a family reunion, and she was laughing at my father for something he had done. And I was sitting right next to her, and she was like leaning and laughing, and I was like taking my phone and taking a picture. And then later she found out I was going to use it in my exhibit, but she didn't mind. And one of the other pictures I was inspired because I work at Cheesecake Factory, and I brought a cheesecake, and it was like 2 a.m. in the morning, and I gave it to my little sister. She always wakes up when we get home, so she was eating it, and she was eating it with such a, I don't know how to explain it, but she was really enjoying that piece of cheesecake. And I took a picture, and I took a picture of her, and I edited it so it would so it could focus on her mouth and how she was looking for it. And then the other picture was the very first picture I took since we had the project presented to us. I talk about my grandmother and everything, because if it wasn't for her, I would not be here. And she has given everything to me, like all the sources and all the tools, just for me not to use it. And I wanted to represent her as the base of the family, because she is. So I told her to put her hands like this. She was actually leaning. She felt sick from her heart. And I told her, can you just quickly help me out before I go to work? And she put her hands like this. And then I told my mom and my sisters to come. And then we were all laughing because we couldn't take a picture. And my grandfather was like trying to get around us. But it was fun. It was fun doing the photo project. I think it really symbolizes more of where I come from and who I think. And it's a different way from the panels that we had before. Photographies are running into people and they look at them, and you don't even have to say much about it. You just have to explain how you flow throughout the process.
Roger?
Well, I honestly don't know where my picture is.
It's right here. There's a small puppy and people at work.
Well, yeah, the small puppy represents my best friend when I was still in Mexico. Like, I came here when I was at the age of 7. So I still remember everything. Waking up on a Thursday morning, it was like 5 in the morning, waking up. My mother pretty much, like any little kid, I don't want to get up, whatever. And she kind of forced me to get up, we had to go. And the thing that I still remember is that my puppy, he kept on following us all the way to the bus station, which is a good 20 minutes away from our house. And he still kept on following us the entire time. And, at the age of 7, and I wanted my little puppy. And my mother said, we can't take him, just can't, just like that, just can't take him. Even when we got on the bus, he was so little, but he still kept on running after us for a good 10 minutes. And when I saw him there, it's when I realized that I was really just never going to come back. That was probably the last time that I'd ever see my home again. But I knew that I was going somewhere else to a new life, a new world, for kind of a better life for me. And I got here, and I did what any other parent would ask of their kids to do: to study, to do your best, to set a goal. And at first, like any other kid, I want to be an astronaut. Then I ended up going, I want to do football, I want to do soccer. I ended up getting really good at it. Afterwards, I started becoming more into the music, where I was introduced to my church choir. And, well, first it was orchestra, but then I was in the church choir, and they really saw that I could sing and play guitar and piano. That was where I learned everything else. I wanted to be a musician. However, my father, he's always saw me more as a business person. I didn't see it. But he told me, you should have music, but it should be your second kind of option. But keep business a little more in mind. I never understood it until I was around the age of 15, because I couldn't work. Even though I saw my friends 14-day work at Kroger, and when I wanted to make money. But my father just told me, I'm sorry, you just can't. He never gave me much of an explanation why. I knew I was undocumented, but you don't really know what that means when you're at that age. But he told me, like, it's simple, we're just going to do a simple landscaping, we're going to be just you and me. And I hated it. I hated having to go out there to be working and stuff like that, because one, I felt like a lot of my friends would know about it, and they would kind of tease me about it, because they're like, oh, you're cutting lawns, typical thing. But at the end, I realized that even though I was doing all this, I was making a lot more money, not to show off or anything, but I was making a lot more money than anything they could do, and I was only like 14 years at the time. I ended up really learning it, and I took it strong at it, and that's when he told me, you are a business, that's what you need to do. I ended up really learning about it. We grew our business a lot more to trucks, trailers, everything, to the point where I started calling in people like, yo, can you help me out? I'll give you this much for an hour. And I ended up liking that. You're only 15 years old, telling guys that are like 20, 30 years old what to do. You're like being your own boss, pretty much. You're like paying them and whatnot. And that's where I ended up learning that. I really do want to do international business, where it's also the picture, where I'm around 16 years old at the time, and I'm working with stones, putting out flat stone designs in that same room, which was also going to be a theater room. That's kind of what represents there. And another thing that I have in mind is that after everything that I've gone through, everything that's happened to me, I still do want to study. I still do want to do international business. It's kind of been my main goal. But what I honestly want now is that I came here at the age when I was 7. I know when I see my siblings, they're at the same age. My little sister's just about to turn 8. I was around the age when I got here. I look at her and I want to do everything for her, to be able to study, because she can do whatever she wants. But I know there's other kids out there who are at that age, and they'll probably end up facing the same things that we are facing right now. I don't want any of them to face it. It's not their fault. Their parents just wanted them to get a better life here. That's why they brought them here, but I don't want them to be discriminated. I don't want them to be blocked or be put quarters on them. So what I fight for right now is obviously to study. But if I can't be able to make that, I want to at least help the next generation that's coming in. Because I know that they will probably face the same problems that we are right now. And they didn't do anything wrong. I just want them to live like, I don't know how old you have. I know you guys are here, great, amazing school. I would love to be here one day. I would really love to be here one day. But right now I'm just working at Fry's Electronics. I'm working with my father, still expanding that. So I kind of have to say for now.
You want to talk a little bit about your photograph? Eduardo's is the one with the clouds behind him.
Yes, I guess, well, that photograph took me a while to get it. I remember that, we had the project assigned in Freedom University, and and I actually have been taking, quite a few photos, before the due date, but I never, quite got, the one that I wanted, something that really meant something for me, and that, I guess captured, I guess the journey of being undocumented, and the struggle, for an education. So it wasn't until my grandparents came, that was maybe 4 months ago. I came to the United States 4 years ago, and I never, I hadn't seen my grandparents because I was raised by them, and my mom was a single mom. So for me, it's kind of like I have two mothers and my dad, who is my grandfather. So they came, to visit me, and it was, when I was with them that I took this photo. I remember just, being with them after long 4 years, that I have been in the United States by myself. My family, was thousands of miles away, from me, and all the things that I went through, without them. And I remember, even though they weren't, next to me, by my side, I knew that they were rooting for me, even from another country, and I could feel that. But then, when they came, I mean, imagine, seeing them after 4 years, endless conversations on the phone and rivers of tears. It's, just seeing them, after 4 years, and just taking a walk, with them, talking about, how things are going in the farm, just about the struggles that I have been, going through, being banned from my dream university, having to pay out-of-state tuition. I mean, I came here because I wanted to have an education, and just, to tell them, that I couldn't do that because I wasn't documented. They couldn't believe it. It was, they couldn't even grasp the idea, that, their son, this little kid, who had always been working so hard for his education, couldn't go to college. That didn't make any sense for me. And so, just, I remember, one day I was with my grandmother explaining her, what it was, to be undocumented in the United States, and especially in the state of Georgia. And like I wrote it on my little, story behind the picture, kind of like just after I told her the story, you know, her expression was, you know, it wasn't happiness, you know, it was like there was no hope, you know, and I had never told that before to any of my family in Mexico because I knew they were going to be just completely, you know, I guess their heart was going to be broken. And so when I finally told my mother, you know, we sat down and, you know, at the table, we had lunch and then we cried, you know. Because, you know, they were the ones supporting me in Mexico, you know. There were times when, you know, there was no water, running water, there was no electricity, you know, but education was never in question. You know, that was something that, you know, we could have been going through whatever you want, you know, but education was never out of the question. You know, I had to have an education because I wanted to be better, and I wanted to do better for my family and for those around me. So I finally explained, you know, what I was doing, that I was going out to rallies, that I was having meetings with the Board of Regents, that we just had, you know, made public the lawsuit against the Georgia Board of Regents. And so, you know, there I was, you know, again, reunited with my family. And so I remember that I took him for a walk because I was actually shooting a video for a scholarship. And so, you know, along with that video, I was, you know, just, I mean, I take pictures everywhere I go. I always take my blue little camera. And, you know, that photo came out of my blue little camera. And I had my tripod. And so, you know, the sky was just clear. And it was a perfect, you know, moment. I had envisioned that photo for a long time. And there I was, you know, with my grandparents by my side, you know, the ones who had supported me through everything, through every obstacle. And, you know, I just snapped, you know, a lot of photos, and finally, you know, that photo came up. And that photo represents that, you know, the long journey and struggle for education. You know, that even though, you know, there might be times where I feel hopeless and I feel like I want to give in, you know, I just think about my grandparents and my brothers, my sisters in Mexico, and I want to be able to help them have a better future. And also just thinking about, you know, the thousands of students across the state of Georgia who, you know, I was just thinking about this, you know, I mean, imagine, you know, this little guy, you know, in his room, so, so, you know, enthusiastic, you know, to continue with his education, you know, applying for colleges. You know, he is you know, doing his best. You know, he's learning a new language. He doesn't have his family by his side. He has to work full time. But he is doing it. You know, how can you say no to him? So, you know, that is what is on that photo. You know, that's what it reminds me of. And you know, even though I always tell myself, you know, you can do this because there is countless of others, you know, going through even worse things, you know, and you have no excuse. And you know, that is why I'm here today. Because, you know, the obstacle can be, you know, the greatest thing, but just the hope and, you know, hard work. I know that, you know, those two things can make anything a reality.
I do want to point out that if you don't see it, his shirt says, I am undocumented, which, you know, it's obvious to us now, but to recognize the courage it takes for these students. Before last fall, most of them had never come out. That terminology is generally used for the LGBT movement now, but there's a parallel as coming out as undocumented, that overcoming of fear, acceptance of yourself, as a full human being who has the same rights as everybody else. And that's, the photo project in many ways is to bring people together who might not usually have conversations, right? Emory students with undocumented students, communities like the Hammond's House and undocumented students. But it also has a huge impact on these students' lives of overcoming fear, of valuing their stories, and their right to be able to go to the schools that they're qualified to go to. I do want to conclude with the photo exhibit talk by bringing your attention to this photograph right here. This was actually taken October 20th during a class, this really special class we had, in which Charles Black, who was a former chairman of the Atlanta Student Movement, and Connie Curry, who was the first white female staff member of SNCC, joined our class. And of course, their stories brought to life the student movement in the South in the early 1960s to life like no other book could. Really what was the highlight of the day, which was incredible, was not only that they shared the historical facts or even their stories, but they started kind of strategizing. What worked, the strategies that worked then that could apply now, the new challenges. Sometimes the social media people say, now movements can reach millions of people at one time, but then there's a sort of apathy at the same time, right? So it was an incredible moment where this strategy of sharing knowledge across movements was happening. But the most important moment was probably when we shared together in freedom songs. And so we had several members of the Freedom Now Singers come and join us. And of course, Charles Black and Connie Curry knew their songs pretty well. and we joined hands in the SNCC style of singing, which is arms crossed and holding hands. We sang Oh Freedom, which is a good one, and We Shall Overcome as well. And that photograph was actually taken by Jason Francisco of the Visual Arts Department here. He rode over on his bike and wanted to witness and document that special day. And so I hope that might be a good segue into, sorry you've been sitting here in silence for so long, a nice segue into maybe the connections between movements, especially the role of students and creativity, how nonviolent civil disobedience is creativity in a sense. It's disrupting the normal everyday. And maybe some of the similarities. For instance, you see Giovanni getting arrested. He's not wearing normal everyday clothes. He's wearing a graduation gown, right? The symbolism of what you wear in the theater, the music, the actions. So I'll let you take it.
Well, I want to say that this has been so educational for me and such an exposure. I was aware of this sort of thing happening, but not really, acquainted, So this has become more of a reality for me. And when I hear the kind of stories you talk about and the kind of experiences that you're going through, I feel very proud of you and the struggle that you've taken on, not only for yourself, but for others who are following the same path. And they will benefit from what you are doing to help make a difference. Yeah. And I often think, as you were talking, I was thinking about my own story. Okay. Growing up, as a young black student, but also I have mixed background. Like, for example, my grandfather, was actually born in Cuba. Yeah. And his mother was African-Cuban, and also his father was French, because he was there during the, they call it the Spanish-American War, which means you were fighting against Spain. And the French always get involved in these kind of revolutions, as we know. So So my great-grandfather was from France, and he was helping to train the Cuban army to fight against Spain. They were taking over, Cuba as a Spanish, colony. So I think about that as well. I grew up in Emory City in Tampa, Florida, which was a very, you might say, multicultural community. So, yeah, half my family, okay, the Gloria Gonzalez, okay? That's my cousin, Camarita Casamayor, okay? Yeah. I have a cousin who was a great Cuban baseball player, all that kind of thing, all right? Then I got the West Indian mixture there as well. So the French West Indian mixture, Native American, my great-grandmother on my mother's side was Seminole Indian. She looked just like, Indian, so her father, escaped there, okay? And her mother was Native American there, okay? So the point is, we are many times multicultural individuals, okay? So I was thinking about that as you went along. I also thought about the education, because my grandmother, she finished the 3rd grade, but she owned her own rooming house, they called it in those days, but she rented rooms out to people and stuff like that. My great-grandmother, she played the one that was a Native American, she played the guitar. She weighed 500 pounds. Had a tiny waist, size 5 shoes. Okay? So she was all arms and hips. Yeah. She was in the fair. You know how they have the circus? Oh. She was a fat lady in the circus. And she died before I was born, but in the same year. But I never got to see her alive. But I saw her in action. She was also a movie star in one of the first 5 talkie movies, the Lupe Valdez. Okay? Yeah. So my sister, who is the archivist and the historian for the family, she found this movie in California. All right? And they had that movie there, and we all watched it. I wanted to watch it alone, with everybody else. I waited, and I saw it. And it was just so moving for me. So when I hear you talk about these stories, I also think about the fact that I was determined that I was going to fight against the segregation at an early age 7. I decided I was going to do that. I used to be the Mr. Coffee, because I used to go and get coffee for the merchants on 7th Avenue. It's now Broadway, but that's where the merchants were. And so I would get out of the bed at 5 o'clock in the morning. All right? There was no trouble. I didn't have an alarm clock, but I could smell the Cuban coffee roasted. And I could smell the Cuban bread, from my window. And I woke up. And so I served coffee to the merchants, sold coffee for them. I went to Las Novedades, the Cuban restaurant, and got the coffee, and I came back and sold it. So I always had plenty of money in my pocket when I went to school, because I worked. So I always had 2 or 3 jobs, even in college, university, whatever. So it was my grandmother who decided, boy, you're going to college. It was in 1958. Well, I was the editor of my school paper, and I got a 4-year scholarship at Florida A&M in journalism, because my paper won the first place in the whole state of Florida. And I was editor of the high school newspaper. Yeah. I wasn't interested in journalism. Okay? So I never responded. They were going to give me a 4-year scholarship. But, you have to be interested. You know what I mean? You have to have a passion for that. So I fooled around. She said, when are you going to college? I said, well, I plan to go. She said, come here, boy. So she took me over to some fellow, who I applied to Bethune-Cookman College, it was too late. I applied to, what other college? Tuskegee, Institute, they call it, in Alabama, it's too late. The only college that started late enough for me to get enrolled was the American Baptist College in Nashville. That's where John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and Jim Babel and all of them went. We were there all at the same time. So that's where I was supposed to be. But I had a work scholarship, okay? And guess where the work scholarship came from? The Southern Baptists. The white Baptists, those who discriminated against people, okay? They wanted to put us in one college over here, so we wouldn't go to theirs. So they gave us scholarships and support, for that one over there. So I went, okay? And the sit-in started when I got there, okay? So I dropped out of school, went on the freedom rides, but I would go back to school a semester at a time. So I started in college in '58. I finally finished my doctorate degree at Harvard, '74. So all those years, I was going in and out, because I would tell my mother, I'm getting back in school. She said, you're not gonna stay there. I said, well, yeah, I'm gonna finish school. You're not gonna finish school. You know what she said? She said, no, you like to go and aggravate white people. No, I'm gonna finish school. So it was actually when Martin Luther King, was assassinated is when I decided now I must go and prepare, because he wanted me to, the last words I had with Martin Luther King. I was in Memphis there, and it was the same day he was assassinated. I was working on a press statement because I was going to open up the press conference in Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King was scheduled, but he couldn't go because he had to stay in Memphis to do the march over again because they broke up in violence. So he said to me, you go. And so we got the press statement together that morning. And he said, the next thing we're going to do is to internationalize and institutionalize nonviolence. Because he knew I had been working all those years, in freedom rides, marches, demonstrations. And all for one, I said, why did Martin Luther King want me to be the national coordinator for his campaign, the last one, for Poor People's Campaign? And it was only maybe, maybe 15 years ago, I finally figured it out. Because I asked Andrew Young, I asked Abernathy, I asked all those people. And it was because Martin Luther King was invited to speak at the UN in '67. And I was the national coordinator for the spring mobilization to end the war in Vietnam, okay, out of New York. And I coordinated 120 organizations in New York City, if you're able to do that, you know what I mean? Okay. And there were people trying to disrupt the meeting and all that kind of stuff, etc. I don't have to go to details now. But that's what I learned to do. Deal with conflict within the organizations that are trying to bring about change. Because if you can manage the conflict among those people who are working for the same goal, okay, you can reach that goal. So it was in SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Martin Luther King Organization. There was nothing but conflict. Jesse Jackson, Hosea Williams, okay? And, these are very strong personalities, so we always had that. But it was in the resolution and the coming together and dealing with that, managing that conflict that helped us to win the goals that we were trying to accomplish. So Martin Luther King deliberately, I finally figured it out, deliberately got people who disagree with each other, but they were bright and smart, so he was able to get the best out of the arguments that they would make. And then he would put it together, synthesize it. Yeah, that's what he was really good at. I watched it, When they were arguing, he didn't say anything, And then when they finished arguing, he would stand up and and he would articulate your position better than you did. He said, oh yeah, Dr. King, that's what I was trying to say. Yeah, okay. So what Martin Luther King, that's why he made me, because the national coordinator, I supervised Jose Williams. I supervised Jesse Jackson. I supervised them. So he put me in charge of them. Okay? So I was able to do what he was able to do with them. So I watched Martin Luther King. I learned from him. So, you know, you do that. So, like this morning, for example, I got a call from Voice of America, and they want to hear about the movement over in Afghanistan. So it's going to be on Afghanistan radio, the interview I gave while I was waiting here. And so it's worldwide in that sense, that people want to know how they can learn to have movements where people can respect them and appreciate them as human beings. Because that's what the conflict is all about. There are people who refuse to accept the fact that you're a fellow human being. Okay? What kind of document? Your document is that you are here. That's proof of who you are. You're a person. You don't have to go back and get papers, okay, to prove that you were born. Okay? Yeah. You are your certificate. You say, document, I am the document. Yeah. Okay? You don't have to look at the photo. You look at the real one right here. Okay? Because when I go to the airport, they look at my picture, you know? In Alabama, it's the same picture I had for last time. They say, is that you? No, I don't know who that is. So, you have to first of all, and that thing I appreciate about what you're saying, the first thing in nonviolence to bring about the change is that you must respect yourself. Okay? That determination. You have to believe that you have the power to do it, to make it happen. Then the next thing is, you don't give up. Montgomery, Alabama, 381 days those people walked. Okay? Guess what? They would have walked 3 years. Because you know what happened? Each step they took when they walked, they grew taller. Yeah. And you know what happened to them? They became so big in character until they could not even fit in the back of the bus. Okay? So what you have to do is grow each day and feel powerful and know that you're going to do it. You know why? Because you will. You will win this one here. Okay? So that's the first thing you have to understand, that you can win this one here. All right? And the nonviolent approach is a guarantee that you can win. Mahatma Gandhi, he took off his tie, you know, he was a lawyer. He took off his tie and his suit, put on a diaper, and beat the British in his diaper. Yeah. So, yeah. So my point is that Mandela, somebody stay in jail 10 years and they think that they're going to get out of there and they're going to get free. I mean, after 10 years, I mean, I get it off. No, 27 years. He still believed. But you know what he was doing? Those 27 years? He was not waiting to be free. He was working on how you run the government. He took the jail, the prison he was in, and made it a university, school of government. So it's what you do with your space, all right? If you want to be the engineer, if you want to be a scientist, you want to go to work on that. Because you know what? If you work on that, it can happen. Yeah. In fact, you should plan to go to Mars because they're now recruiting about 80,000 people to go to Mars. Okay? All right? And my job is to make sure they don't take any weapons to Mars. because they don't need to go up there and shoot up each other. You know, we don't need that. Okay. So that's my goal now. Since I'm not going to Mars, I'm going to be on the screening committee. All right, make sure. But you can go wherever you want to. The sky is not the limit. You can do it. So my mother, you know, she says, no, you're not going to finish school. I gave her the bachelor's degree. She said, oh yeah, thank you. But that's for you. No, no. I went to Harvard University. I gave her a master's degree. And she says, oh, I see. So you may be serious, huh? I said, you wait. I gave her the doctorate degree. She says, thank you. And then I said, who won this thing? Who won that? So the other thing is make sure you have a woman in your life who aggravates you. Be sure, okay? Whether it's your grandmother or your sister or your wife or whatever, okay? And so this nonviolence, that's the second thing. You must be determined. So it doesn't matter. Like you saw in the movie, The Freedom Rides, okay? Some people don't know why was it that the students from Nashville who were involved in the sit-in movement, okay, historians don't even know this. Why didn't the other students take up the Freedom Rides when they stopped? They were burned down there in Anniston, Alabama. The bus was burned. People were beaten up in Birmingham. Why is it that Diane Nash and those of us who were from Nashville, there were other student movements. You know, North Carolina, they had them. In South Carolina, they had them. Other places, all that. Why Nashville? Two reasons. One, we were trained. There is no substitution for training the leadership. Okay, if you're going to fly an airplane, you have to learn to be a pilot. You can't say, well, I have my truck driver's license. You know, you may have your license, but you can't fly an airplane. Okay, so you have to be trained. Okay? And it's possible for you to be trained. That's why you succeed. Martin Luther King had more people on his executive staff in SCLC from Nashville than any other group. Because they were trained by Jim Lawson, Jr. The next reason why the students from Nashville continued the Freedom Rides is because the Freedom Rides, okay, the most critical issue that where you had resistance. Now, they don't want you to ride the bus, you know, in the front and integrate it, you know, through states and stuff like that. No, they don't want that, okay? But guess what? It came through Georgia. No problem. Yeah, integrated. You know why? Because they made the blacks temporary white people. Yeah. So you were white for the day, okay? And then you go back, when you go across the state line, then you become black again, okay? Temporary, okay, for that occasion. Nashville, we had already desegregated the Greyhound bus station in Nashville in 1960, when we had the sit-ins downtown. That's where the bus station was. We'd already desegregated that. Yeah. We desegregated the lunch counters. So it was nothing new for us to desegregate the facility. Okay? So that's what the white people were resisting down in Alabama, in Montgomery's, when the mob came out and attacked us. I was on that bus, okay? And when we got there, they went and they beat up all the reporters. They smashed their cameras, they kicked them, they, you know, just attacked them. They were white, you know, reporters. They beat them up. Because they didn't want us, they didn't want the reporters to get the, you know, the photos and all that kind of thing. All the photos we got from that scene was taken by the policeman. Finally got the files. They didn't want us to come in that facility. That's why they beat us up out there on the in the streets. Why Montgomery? You have to analyze every aspect, not just one thing. You just can't say, oh, those people are mean, and they're bad, and they, you know. Why the mob in Montgomery? You know why? Because the city buses in Montgomery, black and white, they were already integrated. That's what the Montgomery movement, bus boycott was. For the local city buses, you could ride. Okay? In Montgomery. Okay? In the deep south. And already saw. So what they were protecting was a facility. They didn't want you to come in there and use the restroom and use the waiting room and the lunch counter. They didn't want you to come in that restaurant there, because that restaurant was downtown. So if you desegregate the lunch counter and down the bus station, which is downtown, then you were going to threaten the other lunch counters downtown. Well, they can't say, well, you can do it at the bus station, but you can't do it there. And they already desegregated the buses, so these people were up against the wall. They were desperate. You got to watch people's behavior, but you first got to understand why they behave the way they do in such an extreme way. Is there something that they had already experienced that caused them to behave that way? Okay? So you have to take in consideration what I call contingencies of reinforcement. What are those factors that cause these people to be reinforced with that behavior? You have to look at it then, and you have to look at it now. So why is it they don't want you to, okay, get a decent education and go to school in college, okay? Why is it they say believe in college, they believe in this and the other, and people haven't not? They don't deny you. Oh, by the way, I think you have already been supporting the government whenever you go and buy bubble gum and all the other things you buy. I think you pay tax on your clothes, so you already contribute to the, you already pay for your education already through tax. Okay? So my point is, why is it they want to block you now? All right? Well, the reason why these southern states, as well as some others, are so resistant against the so-called undocumented. So what I advocate is you have to decide that you're already documented and you behave that way, all right? Yeah, I like that, documented, the way you put that, okay? Yeah, already documented, so-called undocumented, all right? So then you reverse it and say the people who behave that way have no documentation to support their position. All right? Yeah, because we believe, oh, those people came over, the people that are resistant, did they get documented when they came over? Huh? No. And by the way, you should know this, okay? Even Columbus, he didn't discover America. They discovered him. Yeah, he was not documented. In fact, he was lost. So instead of finding America, okay, America was not lost. The Native Americans welcomed them there. They had a Thanksgiving dinner for them with turkey and everything. Okay? Yeah, taught them how to grow corn. They took it and they fermented the corn and made liquor. And got the Indians drunk. You know, that's what they did with the corn. So, my point is, the other thing you should know is that, oh yeah, you should know this. You know the first person in Columbus group that put foot on soil here in this country? There were 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. That was Columbus. They got caught in a storm. You know how those storms come up? They were lost. They didn't know where to go. And his crew on his ship, Columbus, they were angry with him. They said, look, you got us out here in the middle of this ocean for us to perish. Look at you, what you've done to us. They were crying and shouting because they were all going to drown. And Columbus stood up and he pointed. Pedro Alonso. Pedro Alonso. You know Pedro Alonso? He was the captain of that little ship. The little ship was the lead ship. Pedro Alonso. Columbus was saying, be quiet, follow Pedro Alonso, the captain of the little ship. That was the first one to touch land. It's not the Santa Maria. It was the Pinta. And I think you know the language they spoke, huh? Yeah, that's my point. So you have nothing to be ashamed of, all right? No one's giving you anything. You're willing to work for what you get, like everybody else, okay? And you deserve it, and it's also your right as a human being. You don't carve up no earth and say, well, this belongs to that person, that person. That's what they did to the Native Americans. You got 52 nations here in this one country. They wouldn't even let all the Native Americans be in one section. Okay? They say, you know, before the Native Americans said, we don't have any deeds. Oh, who own this land? Say this land is our, everybody, wherever you need to, you know, whatever it produces. So no, you gotta have some papers to show that you have, you know, the Native Americans said, well, no, we don't have any papers. So they came and drew up some papers. That's how they got it. They said, well, you stay over here in this area, you stay here, and you stay there. They would argue about where your fishing rights. The Native Americans been fishing here all the time. No, you can't do that. What do you mean over here? Right? So my point is, when you know the history, okay, you listen to that history. The main thing is, don't let anybody turn you around. All right? The nonviolent approach will win people over. And that's what you want. All right? You got to go out and help people get registered to vote. All right? Maybe they won't let you vote now, but okay? Yeah, those who can vote. All right? That's another approach you should use to help those people who are supporting and want to change this thing to get that voter registration thing going. Okay? Because you can tell them, when you vote, vote for me. Vote to help, okay, others like me. All right? All right? Cast your vote so it could mean something, all right, to us. All right? And the other thing is, don't be silent. I like the idea that you got these demonstrations and moving, mobilize. Now, the most important thing in our strategy, and I'm going to stop at this point because if you have questions, I'll be happy to respond. You want to be very specific about the change that you want. And I wouldn't say this ordinarily, but I have to say it, okay? The Occupy movement was a great movement. Lots of energy, lots of dedication, and people stood and they stood up against the system, okay? The 1% and that sort of thing. But they did not have a specific solution. So you're going to be very specific about what you want to change, like those laws, all right? And you have to take them on one at a time, all right? Like we had segregation in the restaurants and every place else in Nashville okay? And movie theaters, we stayed with lunch counters until we got the lunch counters. Then we went to restaurants. Then we went to movie theaters, okay? Because when you have that first successful campaign, it's a domino effect. 3 months, we desegregated the lunch counters, 11 nights of demonstrations, we desegregated the movie theaters in Nashville. I counted them, 11 nights, not consecutive, you know, but we didn't go and demonstrate with 11 nights, all right? So, be very specific and mobilize around that particular change you want. And leadership, you gotta get trained leadership. It's not enough to be angry about the problem. You gotta be so sophisticated about the strategy, okay? And you also gotta be willing to talk, like you say. You go there and you confront the people. And the most important thing that you picked up from Diane Nash, which was not a protest against Mayor Ben West. It's a question. Questions people cannot avoid. She didn't go up there and say, oh, you're racist, and you're this, that, and the other, and you just this, that, and the other, segregationist, and calling them names. No. Do you think, he didn't say that you know, he was a bad fellow. You ask him, you think it's morally right? So you appeal to the best in them, not the worst. Violence brings out the worst in others. Nonviolence brings out the best. So you have to constantly work at that, okay? And one of the most difficult things you have to do sometimes is get the people who you expect to support you, and say, oh, you're wasting your time. Okay. Then you're not gonna get anywhere with those people. You know? So you have to deal with that, but don't be persuaded by them, okay? Because they may not have hope, but you have to give it to them, okay? And it's okay to talk to the younger ones, the ones coming behind you, because they've got to get ready. But they've got to learn from your example so they can be prepared. Okay, go ahead. A lot more, but I know I've used up a lot of time. I apologize for that.
We've gone a little bit over time, but I'm sure you guys have a couple of questions, so maybe we can take a few minutes for that. One question.
I have a question. Hi, I'm a faculty member here. Thank you so much. I can say it's a loss for faculty as well, not to have you in our classrooms, because I'd be delighted to have all three of you in my class. But I've just moved here from California, where the movement is very big. And I know it's a national movement. So there's the DREAM Act, and I'm just wondering what kind of support you have. The mobilizations are very big there. So I'm just wondering if there's a national network or what your, if you've gotten support.
Sure, yes. Well, over the past few months, especially since I became involved, I've seen that, definitely there is a growing movement. It used to be, just just a handful of us, on the streets. And, whenever we call out, for the people to support something that they know, is worth, and of course, all of the actions that we do are worth anybody's time, because at the end of the day, it's the state, this affects, every single citizen in our state. And, yes, I think there is a growing movement, just from different organizations, that come together to support, the lifting of the ban, more specifically, or, to support, in-state tuition for undocumented students. But yes, I think, that we have a long way to go, being honest with you. I think that, and that is what we're doing right now. I think that we are reaching out to the people that we know, has, that kind of little hope, that we can change something. And like you said, this is something that we have to give to them. We have to give them a reason, to give them hope, the hope that we have, that we can change things. So yes, there is a growing movement. We hope to become even bigger, in the next, few months. I think, that, just, having the lawsuit, has really impacted, the movement in a good way, because, it kind of just the media, how they have, taken this event of the lawsuit to other people, and more people finds out, and they want to do something, they want to become part of this. And so we are trying to reach out to the people and, have them join us.
So what are some of those organizations?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Well, there is, of course, we have the coalition right now, which is GUYA, Georgia Undocumented Youth Alliance, Dream Activists of Georgia. They have, been very, very active. And, we've learned a lot from, their leaders. I myself, was in just, maybe a month ago, I went on the 21st Century Freedom Ride. And it was all because of Freedom University, which is, the institution that was founded after the ban. And like you said, these four, professors, they came together because, like you said, they wanted to have these hopeful, students in their classroom. And, imagine, just, I'm not going to be able to have, so bright and capable students anymore just because, they cannot produce a social security number, even though they are American in every way. They growing up, pledging allegiance to this, to the United States flag. They pay taxes. They've contributed to the state in so many ways. So they wanted to do something. So, it's just very, those four professors, they brought the idea to bring their students to that, university, to bring their students, the classes and the opportunity, and, be that beacon of hope. So I think, that, just Freedom University, GUYA, Dream Activist, and of course we've had help from so many other organizations, GALAR, the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights. They've been, just so active and, great in helping us. And just so many others, just people from different organizations, from the movement, 50 years ago when segregation was still continuing in the University of Georgia and in the other four universities, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, Georgia Medical College, Georgia State, and Georgia College University. So I think that we still have a long way to go, but I hope, and I truly do, and I will work, and we will work. This will be the year that we, achieve something. But yes, I guess, I hope that answers your question.
Well, it seems that part of what unites all of your experiences is a kind of weaving together of a desire to learn education, right? This kind of intense intellectual drive, along with your activism, your social activism. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about those interconnections and what you've experienced by kind of playing both of those roles at the same time.
Yes, definitely. Do you guys?
Well, activism really was what pushed me, meeting Eduardo and Roger and Dulce and Rigo. These are the names of people that have been here for so long, and they've waited 4 years to possibly go to college. And they are really the ones that inspired me. Activism, my first activism event was the October 5th march, which was Plan B, DACA, Deferred Action for everyone, not just for students. But just being active within our community really made us realize that it's not only us. Like they said, it will benefit our little ones, our younger ones, our high schoolers, which is them who we also trying to reach out through faculty. And even citizens, because they might have an opinion about it, obviously, and we're trying to convince them that it's right, it's an educational right. We should not be fighting for it. It's just why can we not pursue higher education, and it will affect states, and it's kind of surreal that we're having to do this, but of course we will continue.
Yeah, and like somebody said, one of the reasons we're kind of going back to, well, personally, where I manage my clients with my father's business. I manage my clients. They've always been surprised at the fact that I'm only like 18. Everything, because ever since they saw me, I've had some clients that I've had for 5 years. They knew me. They know like any other parent, study, be a doctor, whatever. And when I tell them, they're asking me like, so where are you going right now? Like, I'm not going anywhere. And it's like, why not? That's just like, well, I explain to my situation. That's when they're a little shocked, because they see me as like, I've had one where she's from Haiti, Daniela Montez, one of the best clients I've had for 5 years. She's a nurse, and she's told me like, wow, because I've known you since you were like 15, 14, and you studied and everything, and she was just shocked at everything because she knows what I'm capable of. And that's where I learned a little bit that not everybody knows about her situation. Not really, nobody knows technically. That's where I started reaching out a little bit to some of my clients. I don't want to go into them because it's business, of course, but I kind of went to the ones that have children who are going to school, and they always ask me, why aren't you studying? That's when I take that opportunity and tell them. And then I'm just so surprised at what they tell me, because like, is there any way I can help? Is there any way, like, I know you, Roger, I know what you're capable of, and I really want to help you. Like, is there any way? And that's where I realized that, thank you for all your help, but it's something I want to help others as well, because me, myself, I know that I can have a future probably with this business and making it bigger, but like I said, we're looking out for like the way that we were inspired from dudes, and once she claimed the activists who started this, they inspired us. That's what I want to do now. I want to actually inspire, but not just inspire, but actually help the ones that are coming in, because I know, like my little sister, my little brother, 7, 6 years old, that's the age I came in here. I don't want other kids go into high school, find out, see their peers, see their friends, driver's license, going to schools, everything. And then when you go to the counselor and they ask them, why can't I be able to drive? Why can't I be able to work? That's how I was brought into my picture. Like, you can't drive. I'm pretty sure it's kind of the same story of the father when he was told by his counselor, I'm sorry, but you can't drive. If you are driving and if you're caught, there's a good possibility you'll get deported. You can work. You can't drive to work, you can't do none of this stuff, just because of how we are. And I don't want kind of any other kind of like even my siblings, friends who probably have the same situation. I don't want them to go to that because they haven't done anything.
I guess I could just compliment a little bit on that. I remembered, when speaking to my counselor, and that she finally kind of got herself to ask me, if I was undocumented. And I told her, I think, I'm not sure. And then, of course, there was like the moment where we both came up that I was, illegal, she said, and at that moment, that when she told me that I, couldn't apply to so many colleges that I wanted to apply, that I couldn't get any state tuition or financial aid from the government, even though I have been working so hard. And just, to connect, the activism and the academics, like you said, is, now realizing, that having, attending Freedom University classes, that is not only about, it's not only about the activism, but, the things that I learned at Freedom University through Professor Emiko, through Professor, Pamela, through Bethany, are things that I can actually use to better, the situation in which I am right now. It's not something that I am just merely learning and that I'm not going to be able to use, but it is something that, let's say, when we speak about, 50 years ago when segregation was still continuing, is something that, so why is this happening, today? Why do I have to use this today, almost 60 years later? It's something that it doesn't fit in my mind sometimes, when I read about, how here in Georgia, there was, the universities, would choose to actually give in-state tuition to out-of-state students, to bring them over, to have, that, like you said, multicultural, environment in the schools. But they would rather send, their African American students to other, colleges in another state, instead of accepting them, in here in the University of Georgia or in Georgia Tech. And, it's the same thing that is happening right now. I mean, I was just reading an article about the border regions, and they're asking, for 10 millions in the budget for this year to give out-of-state tuition waivers to students coming from another state, and they don't want us, they don't give in-state tuition to the kids that grew up here, that consider this this state their home and consider the United States their nation, that have been paying taxes, that have graduated from elementary, from high school, and this is something that it doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this to the American kids? Why are we doing this to helpful contributors to our country? And I think, like, again, I guess, going back to the academic and the activism, it complements, it makes me realize that what I'm doing, has a meaning, and it had a purpose back then, and it has a purpose now, and why I'm doing it, and we see the results, and hopefully, that's something that we can get soon.
And if I can kind of wrap it up by talking about why this space at Emory, hopefully you guys are critically thinking about what it means to be in this space and talking about undocumented students. The ban, even though Emory is not a public university, still impacts students and how they're able to go into public universities because of their undocumented status, they can't apply for financial aid. So coming to a university like Emory becomes almost impossible, especially if people are working low-wage jobs. And so I can attest as someone who has taught at Emory for 2 years as a graduate student, compared to my teaching experience at Freedom U, these students want to learn. They come to class on a Sunday for 4 hours, right? Sometimes they carpool for 2 hours to come to class. They work 2 or 3 jobs in restaurants, cleaning buildings, and I know that Emory students would benefit from having these students in their classrooms. They would learn so much from them in addition to these students learning from an environment like Emory. So I hope that universities like Emory in Georgia especially can take the lead from universities such as Hampshire College, such as Berea College in Kentucky, and Syracuse, who are making full scholarships available to students to make sure that they're accessible based on this difference, solely based on presence of papers, right? So Emory does have a position to do the right thing and to make Emory increase its position on a moral standard as well, that it accepts undocumented students. So that's something that we can think about, in the Emory community, is what our stance is to undocumented students. And hopefully more conversations like this can continue. So thank you so much for staying. Really appreciate it. And all of us will be here to answer any more questions you have, and feel free to take a look at the exhibit a little bit more. But thank you so much for coming today, and stay in touch.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.